Hi, I'm Odalyn. They laughed at me, my own mother, my sister, even the boutique staff. Laughed at my jacket, not because it was dirty, but because it reminded them I existed. They called me a fraud, said I wore the uniform for pity. None of them knew the truth. That I'd carried dying men through gunfire, that I'd been erased by my own country, then erased again by my family, and just when they thought I'd finally disappeared, a 4-star general walked in and saluted me. Would you still stay quiet if the people who tore you down sat front row the day the world finally stood up? Before we begin, what time are you hearing this? And where? Tell me below. I read every word. The wind hit me sharp as I stepped out of my car. Charleston's fall mornings had that crisp bite, clean, almost polite, but with an edge that reminded you winter was just waiting. I pulled my old military jacket tighter around me. The sleeves were frayed now, the fabric worn thin at the elbows, but it still kept me warm. And honestly, it was the only thing that still fit right these days. That, and it felt like armor. I wasn't here to shop for myself. I needed a gift card for my goddaughter's birthday. 15 already. She'd asked for something from one of those trendy stores I never set foot in unless I had to. So here I was, walking past tall glass storefronts with mannequins dressed in suede boots and pumpkin-colored coats that cost more than my monthly VA check. I walked in, hoping no one would really see me. Not see me. Just a middle-aged woman with gray creeping into her braid, limping slightly from a leg that never healed quite right. I wasn't trying to make a statement. I just wanted to get in and out without being noticed. But life doesn't usually hand me that kind of luck. The scent of expensive perfume hit me before the sound did. Then came the voice. I heard it before I turned the corner. "Oh my God, this one smells like soap in a hospital," Isolde laughed. "But not even a nice hospital, like an army clinic." I stopped dead. There she was, standing under the warm glow of the fragrance section, tall and polished like always. Perfect blowout, cashmere draped just so. Callista stood beside her, our cousin from Mom's side, the one with the 1,000,000 followers and a plastic smile that never reached her eyes. They didn't see me yet, so I turned. Too late. "Is that—" Callista's voice trailed off, eyes locked on me. "Oh my God, it is," Isolde said, lips curling like she smelled something sour. I gave a small nod, not a wave, not a smile, just acknowledgement. "Did you seriously wear that?" My mother's voice cut across the store like a whip. I hadn't even seen her step up. She stood next to them now, pearls tight against her neck, nails freshly done, eyes scanning me like I was dirt on the rug. "She probably thinks it still makes her look honorable," Isolde said, not even bothering to whisper. Callista held up her phone. I heard the click. Perfect. Veteran vibes fail. A couple browsing scarves glanced over. A teenager smirked. My cheeks didn't burn, but something deeper did. It wasn't embarrassment. It was ache. That deep kind that only shows up when you're too tired to be angry. I didn't say a word. I didn't even blink. Instead, I reached into my pocket and wrapped my fingers around the old coin I kept there. Smooth and cool. Given to me in a country most Americans couldn't pronounce, by a woman whose name I still whispered when the nights got long. She'd never made it home, but I did. My leg throbbed. Standing still always made it worse. But I wouldn't shift, wouldn't give them the satisfaction. I focused on my breath. In, out. "She still thinks she's the brave one," Vera muttered under her breath, just loud enough. "Still playing soldier, huh?" I turned without looking at them again. My basket was still empty anyway. Outside, the air hit different, sharper, like it knew what just happened inside. I opened the car door, sat down slowly, the seat creaking beneath me. I didn't start the engine, just sat. Let the silence wrap around me. My hands rested on the steering wheel, fingers tight. My jacket still smelled like the cedar chest I stored it in between moves. I remembered nights out in the sand, under skies with no stars, just dust and drone lights. I remembered the heat, the constant tension, the sound of radio static and someone whispering my name like it was the last thing they'd ever say. They never asked me what I did. Not once. Not after I came home. It was easier, I think, for them to believe I'd made it all up, that I'd exaggerated the limp, the sleepless nights, that I wore the jacket out of pride, not pain. But the worst part wasn't that they didn't know, it's that they didn't want to. I reached over and opened the glove compartment, pulled out the folder I kept hidden under my insurance papers. The paper inside was old, edges curled, corners creased, but my name was still there, my clearance level, my unit, classified, blacked out, but still mine. At the bottom, one signature remained visible. General Ellison. I stared at that name, wondering if it still meant anything. I didn't call him that night, but I didn't sleep either. 3 mornings later, I stood outside the VA office on Rutledge Avenue, shivering in a slow drizzle that seeped into my sleeves. Charleston rain had a way of sticking to your bones, not enough to be a storm, just enough to make everything feel damp and heavy, like grief, really, quiet and clinging. I adjusted the strap of my canvas shoulder bag and shifted my weight to the good leg. The folder inside held everything I thought would be enough: photocopies, letters, signed confirmations, a name that should have meant something, but I knew better than to count on that. The glass doors finally opened. The woman in front of me, maybe in her 30s, clutched her toddler's hand and glanced at me as we stepped in. Her eyes dropped to my jacket, then away just as quick. I wasn't sure if it was judgment or discomfort. Either way, I was used to it. Inside, the air was too cold. Overhead lights flickered faintly as I approached the front desk. A young woman named Alicia sat behind the plexiglass, her voice light but practiced. "Hi there. Last name?" "Marin, Odalin." She typed, eyebrows narrowing after a few seconds. "I'm not seeing you in the system. Can you spell that for me again?" I spelled it. Twice. She clicked around some more, her expression turning polite confused. "Are you maybe listed under a married name?" I shook my head. "Never married." "Well, do you have a DD-214? I slid the clearance letter from my folder. "My unit was blacklisted. No standard discharge form. This is what I have. A DOD validation and a signed document from General Ellison. It's notarized." She took the page carefully, but her face tightened. "Okay. I'll have to ask my supervisor. One moment?" I nodded and stepped aside. My hand found the coin in my coat pocket again. The metal was colder than usual. A man in his 60s emerged from the back, tall, thin, with a voice like paper being torn too slowly. "Ms. Marin?" "Yes." He looked over the letter, his eyes scanning each line, but not with curiosity, more like caution. "I understand your situation," he began, "but I'm not authorized to process anything without the DD-214. These clearance codes, they don't interface with our local system." "It's not a code, it's a command validation," I said, keeping my voice low. "There's a file. It's flagged. Red clearance." He folded the page and handed it back, almost like he didn't want to hold it longer than necessary. "I suggest trying the Joint Base office," he said. "That's where most of these classified vet records funnel through. They may be able to retrieve something deeper in the archive." "I already did. They sent me here." He didn't flinch. "Try again, or submit a FOIA request. Sometimes those get routed faster." It was the same circle I'd walked before, around and back to nowhere. I nodded slowly. Not because I accepted it, but because I'd run out of words for moments like these. "Thanks," I said simply. I stepped aside. That's when I heard her. "Half these people are faking it anyway," someone said behind me. Young, clipped voice, female. "You'd be amazed how many try to game the system." I turned just slightly. A lieutenant in uniform stood near the water fountain, speaking to another officer. She didn't notice me watching until her eyes slid briefly to the jacket I wore. She looked away. No one said anything more, but it stung worse than if she'd shouted. I kept moving. On my way out, I paused just beneath the awning. The rain had softened but hadn't stopped. I reached for my keys, then froze. A woman about my daughter's age was standing by the door, uniform crisp, posture careful. She held the door for an elderly vet behind her, then glanced over at me. For a second, her eyes caught mine. She hesitated, then gave a small nod. Not casual, not polite, respectful. "Ma'am," she said quietly, "if they're giving you trouble, it's usually because they don't understand clearance levels. They're not trained for red flag units." I didn't reply. She didn't wait for one. She walked off into the mist, disappearing down the steps. But something about her tone stayed with me longer than her footsteps. I sat in the car for a while before I could drive. Fingers curled around the steering wheel, knuckles tight. And then, my mind took me back. The sound of rotors, dust whipping around my boots, the heat pressing into my gear like a second skin. I remember every heartbeat in that moment, how the radio crackled with a command, how my team leader's voice broke through the chaos. "You get them out. We'll cover the rear." I hadn't hesitated. I'd carried Corporal Dean on my shoulder. His blood soaked through my sleeve. Specialist Lim stumbled beside me, his arm shredded and dangling. We made it to the evac zone. They didn't. That was 15 years ago, and I hadn't spoken their names aloud since. Back in the present, I reached for my phone. I didn't even realize I'd opened the Contacts app until I saw it. Ellison, still saved, still untouched. I hovered over the number for a moment, thumb twitching. I didn't call him, but I didn't delete it either. By morning, I had driven to Fort Braxton without telling anyone. It wasn't a plan. I just couldn't stay still anymore. The sun was barely up, the sky painted in pale gray streaks. As I pulled through the gates, the guards waved me in with the same casual authority I used to command. That irony wasn't lost on me. I gave a nod, more out of habit than anything else. The base hadn't changed much. Same dull beige buildings, same gravel crunch under tires, same cadence chants echoing from morning drills. I slowed the car and parked near the commissary. Saturday mornings were always the slowest. Less chance I'd run into anyone who'd ask too many questions. I stepped out, boots hitting the pavement like they still remembered formation. My jacket hugged closer as the cool breeze whipped through the lot. I adjusted the collar and walked toward the sliding glass doors. The smell of concrete and vending machine coffee hit me the second I stepped inside, and something about it grounded me. No judgment here, no stares, just the ghost of who I used to be. I grabbed a cart and moved toward the produce section. It wasn't just about groceries. I needed a place where I felt like I still existed. Somewhere between the milk and the cheese aisle, I heard them. Two young lieutenants, barely out of college, leaned near the yogurt display, talking just loud enough for me to hear. "That jacket looks like it's been through Vietnam and back," one said with a chuckle. The other laughed louder. "Bet she printed it online. Stolen valor stuff. These types always show up trying to play hero." I didn't even glance their way. I focused on the eggs in front of me. Large brown, carton intact, my fingers wrapped around the edge. "Don't drop them." "That patch isn't even standard," one muttered again, probably embroidered at some mall kiosk. They didn't know who I was, and honestly, they didn't care, but that didn't make it hurt less. I wheeled the cart past them, head high, eyes straight. They didn't stop. Their giggles trailed behind me like bad perfume. At the checkout, a master sergeant, retired, judging by the way he stood, scanned my items. His shoulders were stiff, his hands steady. He didn't speak much, but when he reached for my eggs, his eyes flicked up. They landed on the patch above my heart. Faded, yes, but still there. He didn't ask, didn't joke. He scanned the last item, folded the receipt, and then paused. When he handed it to me, his voice was low. "Ma'am." Just that, but the nod he gave, sharp, deliberate, was the kind you only get from someone who's been where you've been. I nodded back. "Sergeant." No more words were needed. That 2-second exchange did more for my spirit than anything in the past week. But the moment was short-lived. I was halfway to the door when I heard it. "Well, well, didn't expect to see you here." Isolde. Her voice had that syrupy tone she used when she was playing nice, but couldn't quite hide the sting underneath. I turned slowly. She was standing near the entrance with a friend, someone overdressed for a commissary. Hair done, makeup sharp, the kind of woman who wore perfume to the gym. Isolde smirked. Shopping where you're not banned, that's new. I didn't dignify it with a reply. My grip tightened on the grocery bags, fingers pressing against the plastic handles. She waited, maybe expecting me to snap, but I didn't. I just walked past. "Still pretending you belong, huh?" she called after me. I kept walking. Almost made it to the doors when the automatic sensors clicked and the glass parted. And then he walked in. Tall, silver hair, perfectly pressed uniform, and 4 stars gleaming on his collar. General Ellison. He hadn't aged much, just a bit more steel around the jaw. He stopped cold. His eyes found my jacket. And he didn't blink. He didn't hesitate. Didn't even blink. Just stood there, back straight, boots still, and raised his right hand. The room didn't fall silent because of me. It fell silent because of what he did next. General Ellison, 4 stars on his collar and decades of command behind his eyes, saluted me like I still wore the rank, like I still mattered. "Captain Odalyn Reeves," he said, voice calm, steady, and loud enough to carry across the refrigerated cases. "It's good to see you standing." The metal carts stopped rolling. The chatter died. Even the kid from produce froze mid-stack, holding a bunch of bananas like they might explode. I didn't move. I couldn't. Not because I was afraid, but because the part of me that used to respond, instinctively, automatically, to that call had been buried so deep it took a full breath for it to resurface. I stood, I squared my shoulders, and I saluted him back. He lowered his arm only after I did, and that's when the murmurs started. The 2 lieutenants who'd been laughing at me earlier, pale. One shifted his stance, eyes darting between me and the general. The other stiffened like he was about to get called to the principal's office, and Isolde, she didn't say a word. Not at first. Ellison turned slightly, scanning the people now watching. "You're standing in front of the last surviving officer from Spectre Group," he said. "Her unit pulled us out of Tyran when everything went to hell." Someone in the back gasped. He went on, matter of fact, like he was giving a sit rep. It was classified, still is, for the most part. But 32 of us wouldn't be breathing today if Captain Reeves hadn't led that exfil. I was one of them. I could feel the tension shifting in the air, shame clinging to some, awe blooming in others. The cashier, Master Sergeant something, I never got his name, had gone from polite to visibly shaken. His hands trembled as he unfolded the receipt I hadn't taken yet, refolded it, then laid it down again like he wasn't sure what protocol applied now. One of the young lieutenants snapped to attention. The other followed. Then a few more. Not all, but enough to change the room. General Ellison looked at them. "Next time you assume someone's story," he said flatly, "ask yourself whether you could survive a 10th of it." That's when Isolde found her voice. "She's bluffing," she said, trying to laugh it off. "Come on, Dad always said she played soldier better than she actually—" Ellison cut her off without even looking her way. "That operation isn't even public record," she pushed. He turned, dead on. "That's the point, ma'am. It wasn't meant to be." Then his aide, a tight-jawed woman with a clipboard and eyes sharp as glass, stepped forward. "Sir?" Ellison nodded. "Escort these 2 out, please. They've caused enough disruption." "You can't be serious," Isolde snapped, but her voice cracked in a way I hadn't heard since we were kids. Not angry, not defensive, just small. Her friend, who'd stayed silent this whole time, grabbed her purse and muttered something under her breath before following the aide. I didn't say a word, didn't gloat, didn't smirk. I just let it happen. 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from General Ellison in the side cafe near the commissary's exit. He'd ordered 2 coffees, black, no sugar, and sat like we'd done this before. "You kept quiet all this time?" he asked. I nodded. "Why?" "Because no one ever asked. Because they wouldn't have believed me if I told them. Because some wounds don't scream, they whisper, and only to the ones who remember where they came from." He didn't press. Instead, he reached into his breast pocket and slid a small folder across the table. "I'll start the process," he said. "We'll declassify what we can. Your medical records, your commendations, anything that was buried under clearance. You've earned your name back." I looked at the folder, didn't touch it. The silence between us filled the space heavier than any words could. "You didn't have to do that in there," I finally said. My voice was steady, but I could hear the edge in it. "No, I didn't," he agreed. "But it needed to be done." We sat like that for a while, not talking, just breathing in the gravity of things too long unspoken. Then he broke the quiet. "Would you be willing to speak to the Officer Training Corps when this is through?" I looked toward the entrance. People were still whispering, watching. A girl near the exit, maybe 19, stood just behind her mother, eyes locked on me. She wasn't scared, she was waiting, like someone had finally shown her something she didn't know she needed. I turned back to Ellison. "Yes," I said, "but on my terms." He nodded once, smiled. Not big, not soft, just enough to mean it. As he stood to leave, he reached into his pocket again. This time, he placed something small and cold into my palm. A coin, unit issued, embossed with 4 stars and the crest of a unit I thought had vanished into redacted pages. Not a gift, not a memento, a signal. 3 days later, I was back in my apartment, cross-legged on the floor, dinner balanced in a chipped bowl on my lap. The room was quiet, save for the hum of the fridge and the buzz of my phone lighting up again and again on the counter. Messages, mentions, a blurry photo someone had taken of Ellison saluting me at the commissary now headlined the base bulletin board. I didn't click it, didn't reply to anyone either. I stared at my spoon, stirring rice that had gone cold, wondering why something that should have felt like vindication only left this dull weight pressing on my chest. For so long, I had moved through the world like I didn't exist. Now, suddenly, everyone had something to say about me, and none of it came from the ones who mattered. The screen lit up again. This time, the name on it wasn't a stranger. Mom. I let it ring. It rang again. And again. Eventually, I answered, if only to make the noise stop. Her voice came in sharp. No greeting. "Your sister hasn't stopped crying since Saturday. Do you have any idea what you've done to her?" I swallowed, silent. "She was humiliated, Adeline. Publicly, in front of military people, officers. She did that herself," I said, my voice flat. "Don't play innocent. You planned this. You've always been jealous of the attention she got." I leaned back against the wall, fingers gripping the phone tighter. "Jealous? Of Isolde? She said you dragged some general into your drama just to prove a point." "Mom, I didn't drag anyone." He saw what happened and chose to speak. There was a pause, then a scoff. "I don't care what he said. You embarrassed the family. That's not how we handle things." I closed my eyes, the words scraping at something deep. "You mean how we handle things is pretending none of it ever happened? You owe your sister an apology. She's fragile right now. If you really cared, you'd do what's right and de-escalate all this." I didn't reply. "You always make everything about you. That's why people walk away, Adeline. That's why you ended up alone." I ended the call. There was no slam, no shouting, just a quiet click, and the silence that followed was somehow louder than her voice. I stood up slowly and walked outside to the concrete steps. It was cool out, humid, the kind of southern night that hugged your skin and made you feel like the sky might break open any second. I sat down and rested my elbows on my knees. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. Just emptied. People thought justice came with trumpets and applause, but sometimes it came on a Tuesday night, wrapped in silence with no one around to witness it, and somehow it still felt like I had lost. Not the battle, but something softer, something that used to believe people could be proud of you without first destroying you. My phone buzzed again in my hoodie pocket. I almost didn't check it, but I did. A voicemail from the VA office. I played it on speaker, letting it echo into the night. "Good evening, this is Jessica from the Charleston VA case team. We've received a high-priority flag on your records from Defense, a request for expedited review, initiated directly by General Ellison. We'll be reaching out this week. Thank you, Captain Reeves. Captain. I hadn't heard it outside of Ellison's mouth in over a decade. I leaned forward, elbows on thighs, and just breathed. Not in relief, in hesitation. This wasn't just a name on paper anymore. They were reopening things I had tucked into shadow for years, intentionally, sometimes cowardly, but always for survival. Did I still want to be seen? I looked up at the sky. No stars tonight, just a stretch of clouds floating heavy like my chest. My hands shook, not from fear, from memory. My fingers curled against my knees, and suddenly I was back, dust and blood in the air, my hand pressed against Sergeant Decker's chest, trying to stop the bleeding. "Stay awake! Stay with me!" I had yelled over the gunfire. "We're 5 minutes out!" His eyes had been wide and searching. He never made it to the 5-minute mark, and I never told anyone I was the last one to speak to him. That voice, the one shouting in the field, taking command, it trembled now, alone, sitting on cracked cement steps, listening to cars pass in the dark. After a while, I got up and went inside. I turned on the desk lamp, the kind with the flickering bulb I kept meaning to replace, booted up the old laptop, inbox, unread message, subject, Captain Reeves, invitation to speak with our officer development cohort, Friday 0900. I hovered my cursor over reply, but I didn't click it, not yet, not that night. By morning, I had ironed the jacket for the first time in over a decade. The cuffs still curled slightly, the fabric still held its faded green like a memory pressed too long between book pages. I didn't touch the medals, I never wore them, but I made sure every thread that once held meaning still held its place. When I pulled into Fort Braxton's East Gate, a quiet hum had already settled over the base, the kind that wrapped around early cadence calls, boots on pavement, flags rising into mist. I parked near the auditorium and stepped out. The gravel crunched under my shoes, steady and sure. I adjusted the folder tucked under my arm, not because I needed it, but because after everything, I still felt like I had to carry something, just in case. The glass doors of the auditorium opened automatically. Lieutenant Narina was waiting inside. Her expression wasn't polished. It was honest. "We're honored to have you, ma'am," she said quietly. I gave her a small nod. "Let's keep it simple. First names only today." She smiled, stepping aside. "Of course." Audalyn. Inside, the room was only half full. Young officers in their cadet blues, straightbacks, quiet chatter. Some glanced at me with vague recognition. Others didn't look at all. I liked that. It gave me space to choose how much of myself I wanted to hand over. I walked slowly to the front, placed my folder on the podium and looked at them. No script, no rehearsed speech, just my story. "I'm not here to impress you," I began. "I'm here because leadership has a cost, and you need to know that before you step into the weight of it." I didn't speak about myself. Not directly. I spoke of field decisions, of what it meant to lose communication mid-operation, to make a call when there was no one left to ask, to keep someone alive when all you had was instinct and a torn bandage. The room got quiet, pens scratched, a few sat forward, and in the back, General Ellison had slipped in unnoticed, arms folded, face unreadable, watching. When the last word left my lips, there was no applause, just silence. And then, a low voice near the aisle. "Ma'am." I turned slightly. A young officer stood. "I just wanted to say, thank you." I gave him a brief nod. "You'll earn your own thanks one day. Just make sure it costs something real." Afterward, I stepped down from the podium and walked through the crowd. Narina caught up beside me. "You handled them like a general," she said with a grin. "I was never that," I replied. "I just made it home." As we stepped into the side hallway, a younger officer leaned in and whispered, "They tried to say you were a fraud, but someone leaked your field photo. From Tyron. It's everywhere on the private vet boards now." My chest tightened. I never gave permission for that. "Who posted it?" I asked. He shook his head. "No one knows. But they're talking about you now. Big time." Later that night, I sat cross-legged again, this time in front of my laptop. My inbox was flooded. Messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years, others I'd never met. But my name, it wasn't just a name anymore. It was a thread, pulled, exposed. On the private veteran group on Facebook, I saw the thread, Captain O. Reeves, Spectre Group. Dozens of comments, some supportive. She saved 3 men in my husband's unit. She was the one who didn't leave anyone behind. I remember that jacket. We heard rumors but never saw her again. Others weren't. Where's the proof? Anyone can wear a patch. She comes out of nowhere after 10 years? Seems suspect. And then, one comment hit like a sucker punch. Isolde Reeves. She always wanted attention. She wasn't even part of our family holidays. She was too busy being invisible. Looks like she finally got the spotlight she craved. The likes piled on, fast, old classmates, distant cousins, co-workers of Isolde's, people who never knew the nights I spent duct taping my boots so they'd hold through another trek. I didn't cry. I closed the laptop. My fingers moved instinctively to the small wooden box in the drawer. The challenge coin sat where I always kept it. I rolled it between my fingers, cool and smooth, the edges worn from years of turning over decisions. I opened my folder, the one labeled Spectre Case Files, Partial D-Class. Inside were pages, redacted lines, signatures faded by time, but still intact. I began dragging files to a USB stick. Slowly, deliberately. There was a line being drawn, and I needed to know which side I was going to stand on when the dust settled. I picked up the phone and called Ellison. He answered on the second ring. "Sir, I need to do something, but I want to do it quietly." His tone was steady. "You don't need to prove anything, Captain." I looked down at the file names on the screen, the past breathing through them. "It's not proof I'm after," I said. "It's a line." The line was already drawn, quietly, carefully, deliberately. They thought I was bluffing, but the packet had already left my hands and landed in Ellison's the night before. Sealed, reviewed, cleared. That evening, the Fort Braxton HOA Veterans Memorial unfolded beneath a wide orange sky. Rows of white chairs curved toward the granite monument at the center of the lawn. Lights flickered on as the sun dipped low, catching on ribbons, on medals, on stiff collars and pressed skirts. I arrived early, not because I wanted to be seen, but because I needed a moment. Just one moment of stillness before they looked at me differently. The jacket I wore had been restitched, not new, but whole, just like me. General Ellison stood near the platform. He didn't wave, he nodded. Once. That was enough. I climbed the 3 steps to the speaker's platform, folder under one arm. I wasn't scheduled to say much, just a few words before introducing the evening's guest speaker. A simple duty, except nothing about this night would be simple. The folding chairs filled. Families, cadets, retirees, and brass filtered in. I spotted Narina near the front, eyes already locked on me. And there, 3 rows back in the VIP section, Isolde, draped in burgundy silk, wineglass in hand, laughing with someone who clearly thought she belonged there. I didn't acknowledge her. I stepped up to the mic, took a breath, and began. But I didn't even make it through my first sentence. Behind me, the giant event screen, meant to display flags and slideshow tributes, flickered to life. A pixelated image appeared. My patch, the one we were ordered never to discuss. Then a black and white scan of a redacted file. Text blurred, but names faintly visible. One in bold, Spectre Group, Tyrant Extraction, Personnel, Reeves O. Gasps rippled, then silence. Every head turned toward me. I stood frozen. "I didn't authorize this," I said, stepping back from the mic. A firm voice responded from the crowd. "I did." Ellison. He took one step forward, hands clasped behind him. Because sometimes recognition isn't about glory, it's about truth. Someone clapped, then another. The clapping grew, slowly, unsteadily, and then everyone stood. Even those who'd once stared at me with doubt now watched me with something that resembled understanding. And that's when Vera came forward. She moved hesitantly, as if unsure whether she was part of this moment. "I didn't know you went through all that," she said. Her voice was small, not soft, just uncertain. I didn't soften in return. "You didn't ask," I said, looking her straight in the eye. "You just assumed I had nothing to show because I didn't show up to decorate your holidays." Her lips parted like she wanted to defend herself, but she didn't get the chance. Isolde appeared next, arms crossed, tone sharp. "Oh, please, you've always painted yourself the victim. This martyr act is just more of the same." But this time, someone else answered. Narina stepped forward, shoulders back, uniform crisp. "No, ma'am," she said, voice cool but cutting. "She didn't make herself the victim. She made herself invisible. And you helped." The crowd had gone still again, but this silence was different. I didn't say another word to either of them. I turned, walked down the steps, and left them standing in the wash of artificial light and exposed truth. This wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. As I neared the parking lot, I felt Narina catch up. She walked beside me a few quiet paces before asking, "Would you come speak at the academy next month?" I glanced over, let the corner of my mouth lift. "I might," I said, "but next time, I won't wait to be saluted." The next morning, I woke before the sun, jacket already pressed and waiting by the door. I drank my coffee in silence, letting it cool too much before I finished it. No makeup, no accessories, just the jacket, the old boots, and a quiet spine of steel I'd forgotten I still had. I walked into the boutique like I had weeks ago, but this time, the silence wasn't cruel. It was watchful. Two of the same employees were behind the counter. One blinked twice when she recognized me. Neither smiled, neither greeted. That was fine. I wasn't here for a warm welcome. The scent of overpriced candles, citrusy perfume, and polished floors tried to overpower the air. It didn't work. The weight I carried wasn't perfume level, it was history level. I walked the same path to the back aisle, past the fragrance counter where they once laughed, past the display of handbags where my sister had whispered about playing soldier, past the space where I once froze mid-step while Vera looked on, unimpressed. Not this time. I reached the middle of the floor, paused, and waited. 3 minutes later, the door chimed. Isolde. Of course. She swept in like she was the main act in a play that no one asked for. Heels clicking, laughter rehearsed, voice already raised. She had 2 women with her. From the glance I caught, they looked like Charleston socialites or wives of officers with too much wine and not enough spine. The moment she saw me, she veered my way like a magnet. "Oh, look who's staging her comeback tour. Should I clap?" I didn't bother to turn to her yet. Instead, I looked directly at the boutique manager, a woman maybe in her late 50s, tightly pulled hair, cardigan neat as a folded flag. "Last time I was here," I said calmly, "you watched them mock a veteran in uniform and didn't say a word. Let's see what silence costs today." The woman blinked. Twice. She adjusted her pearl bracelet, then stepped forward. I'm very sorry for what happened that day. We misunderstood the situation." Came a murmur from the fragrance display. 2 women, browsing Chanel samples, had paused. "That's her," one whispered. "From the Spectre file. My husband said it circulated all over the base." A new air filled the room. Not perfume, recognition. Isolde scoffed. "Oh, please, are we all pretending now? That this whole thing wasn't a giant manipulation? You're milking this. What's next? Parade floats?" I turned slowly. "Actually," I said, "I submitted everything. Field logs, recovery records. I didn't want to, but I did. Not for medals, for the women who come after me, so they don't get erased like I almost was." She rolled her eyes. "You're just trying to humiliate us. Publicly. You want Mom to grovel. You want everyone to say they were wrong." "No," I said, my voice lower now, more surgical. "I want the truth to stop being optional. You shamed yourselves. I just stopped covering for you." The room stilled. A young girl by the fitting room, maybe 16, stared openly. Her mother placed a hand on her shoulder but didn't look away either. Isolde's face flushed, but she forced a laugh. It rang too loud, too brittle. "God, you're dramatic." I walked to the counter. From my inside pocket I pulled a folded letter and placed it neatly by the register. "It's for the owner," I said to the manager. "Not about press, not about lawsuits, just words. You can pass it on." The manager nodded, quiet. I turned to leave, paused just long enough to glance back, not at my sister, but at the door where the first insult once hit. "This place didn't humiliate me," I said softly. "It just gave everyone else the room to do it out loud." And then I walked, out the glass doors, into the streetlight, into the wind. The second my boots hit the pavement, my phone buzzed. I checked it without breaking stride. A message lit the screen from Ellison's aide. "Silver Star confirmation, ceremony next week. We'd be honored if you'd wear the jacket." I smiled. Just once. They thought the ceremony would be quiet, but from the moment I stepped into Fort Braxton Memorial Hall, I knew otherwise. The space was grander than I remembered, columns wrapped in flags, floor polished to the kind of shine that only comes from old respect. It didn't echo like a gymnasium or ring like a chapel. It hummed. I wore the jacket. Same one. Except now the faded thread above my heart had been restitched. The name, Reeves, sat cleanly across the fabric, dark against the green, no longer frayed at the corners. A line of cadets stood as I passed, their backs straight, their eyes following, not with curiosity, but with something close to reverence. I gave them one nod. That was enough. I didn't walk faster. I didn't shrink. I didn't smile. I simply moved forward. General Ellison met me near the front row. He said nothing, just a hand lightly on my shoulder before stepping toward the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, officers, cadets, and families," he began, "today we honor a woman whose name was never supposed to be known, but whose silence saved lives." He turned, locking eyes with me as he said it. "Captain Audalyn Reeves, Operations Specialist, Spectre Group, recipient of the Silver Star, Presidential Unit Citation." Applause followed, not explosive, but weighted, honest, not for performance but for presence. He pinned the medal just below my name patch, his hands steady, deliberate. For the first time, what I had done was not whispered behind closed doors. It was spoken clearly, on record, before witnesses. It was real. Behind us, a screen lit up, displaying names, some full, others redacted, and blurred photos of the Spectre Group, people whose faces had been my every morning and midnight, my past, my fear, my reason. I took a breath, stepped to the mic. "My name isn't the only one that belonged to that unit," I said. "Some didn't make it home. Some did but were never the same again. Some disappeared quietly into civilian life. But all of them deserve to be remembered, not just by name, but by truth." From the front row I saw her, the mother of Darren Salter, our unit's linguist. Her shoulders shook. I stepped down from the stage without pause, knelt beside her and took her hand. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The crowd stood again. But I only stood because she squeezed my hand once, and I knew we were both letting go of something. As the room cleared later, I turned, and there was Vera. My mother stood near the exit, alone. She wore a dark coat, hair pinned too tightly, lips pressed in that half-frown she always wore when she didn't know what to say but didn't want to leave before saying something. Isolde wasn't there. No surprise. Vera waited until I neared. "You deserve this," she said finally. I didn't know how to say it." I didn't flinch. "You still don't," I replied, voice level. "But thank you for trying." She gave a half nod. I gave one back. No embrace, no dramatic tears. Just a final understanding. We were no longer enemies, but not reconciled either. We'd just drawn a new line. That would be enough. Outside, the sky had shifted to that early evening pink. Narina was waiting near my car. "They want you as a permanent advisor," she said. "For the Spectre curriculum, you'd have full oversight, no token role." I raised a brow. "I'll think about it." She laughed lightly. "Of course you will." I unlocked the car, slid the jacket off my shoulders, and tossed it onto the passenger seat. Not like I was discarding it, but like I didn't need it to hold me up anymore. I reached for my bag and paused. There, on the passenger seat, was the folded letter I'd left at the boutique. Someone had returned it. A small, sticky note was now attached. "We're retraining our staff. Thank you for your courage." It didn't absolve anything, but it acknowledged something. I kept the letter in place, like a flag folded back to its square. As I drove home, the hum of the tires beneath me sounded steady, not heroic, not cinematic, just peaceful. And that night, as I lay back in bed, I found myself thinking about silence again. They mocked what they couldn't recognize. But silence doesn't mean shame. Sometimes silence just means you were doing what no one else could. And now, I'm finally done apologizing for that. This jacket may fade again one day, but they'll never forget the name stitched above the heart.